Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to the 6 Feet Apart podcast, a conversation designed to help us find our way when answers seem out of reach and life just doesn't make sense. We're Luke and Ben, and we want to thank everyone for joining us on what is our very first podcast.
It's kind of exciting. It's a little bit historic moment here, Luke. I like it. This is fun. We anticipate and hope that this will be like a gathering of just picture, I don't know, maybe a restaurant where anyone can come in. I mean, and we really do anticipate there'll be people from all over the spectrum of faith on this, like people who are just like, I can't swallow the God pill at all right now, or I've had a horrible experience in church, I'm done with that, to people who are just exploring it, maybe new into what is this Christianity thing about, to people who kind of live and breathe like every day I talk to God this morning, everybody in between. It's about a journey. It's about exploring questions of faith together, not ramming your perspective or mine down someone else's throat, but just friends, being able to hang out and talk about really important and substantive matters. So that's the dream when we cook this thing up. And here we are doing our first episode already, Luke. It sounds pretty cool. Both Luke and I come from, just full disclosure, we kind of both come from a faith perspective, very much so. I've kind of bet the farm on that for reasons that I think as we share together will probably become evident. That's kind of where we're coming from. But all this is a time for us to welcome kind of every perspective. And the title, I like the title. I think Luke came up with that in a moment of extreme insight. 6 feet apart, because that's where we obviously are living at the time we're recording this, in a coronavirus reality, 6 feet apart. And it kind of describes how some people feel about, man, some people seem like they've got all the answers. They have the faith thing figured out. They aren't troubled by this or that, but not me. I feel like certain answers are at a distance from where I am. I can't get there. There's a gap that remains that is unsettling to me, or for whatever reason, 6 feet apart. So this is a conversation designed exactly for that, and for people who are honest enough to say, let's go on a journey together of a spiritual nature, but really one that encompasses all of life, because let's be honest, not everything makes perfect sense. And let's see where we end up together if we just go on that journey.
Yeah, and especially right now, I mean, this has been so disorienting and disrupting. I think, we were talking the other day, I mean, you can't really find anything that's been more disrupting to life, for most of us in our lifetime, like what we're experiencing now. So that kicks up all kind of questions. And in the midst of that, I think one of the things we're trying to do in the podcast, there's kind of a larger question that we're going to sort of go after, maybe in some smaller chunks, or answer some different questions that'll help speak to the larger one. And it almost is kind of like just saying, in light of the coronavirus pandemic, how could you even give any credence to the Christian perspective? Like, how could you subscribe to that? In light of everything that's going on and what we're observing in the world today, how does this God thing even make sense? Or what Christians would even call God? Okay, how does that even work? And so if you find yourself starting to wonder that, I think all of us are at some level are curious about that, then I'd say you're in the right place. This is exactly the kind of conversation you want to be a part of. And we're just trying to seek some perspective and go after maybe different things along the way that could help us get perspective on that sort of underlying foundational thing. And we're going to start today in a place that just even questions our questions. All right, here's the thing we're really taking on today is, what do we do with our doubt and our questions? As soon as you start asking yourself questions, they've all been kicked up in this recent time, then you even kind of start to wonder, is it okay to ask questions? I have these doubts. Where do I go with them? What do I do with them? What does that mean for me? Is it okay to have these questions and to have these doubts? Or do I have to pretend like I don't? Do I need to stuff them down? And I just think that's exactly the place to start. It's perfect, because if we think we don't have questions, we're lying. So we might as well start out by being honest about that. And just Ben, maybe you start talking.
Yeah,
about that.
I love what you said there, Luke. If we pretend we don't have questions, that's actually a problem. As I think just right out the gate, I think the kind of perspective that's probably not really honest is the person who has certainty about everything.
Right.
They are absolutely, and I think there's some pressure in Christian circles, to confuse that. Like that's what biblical faith is, and the less questions you allow, I have no room for doubt. I'm just kind of like everything's nailed up in a neat little box, and that doesn't have the ring of authenticity to me from my own experience. I'm just telling you, I got too many questions. I don't want that kind of faith, and I'm relieved when I come to the Bible to find that that's not the kind of faith that really we're called to. And also, I get equally nervous for those who are like, well, any reasonable person will not have any faith perspective, and what they mean is because I don't, and I'm not comfortable with that, and therefore, if you're smart, I don't. I just find both kind of the Christian absolute certainty and the sort of skeptic absolute certainty kind of arrogant and honestly not as honest as I want to pretend I can be anyway, and I want us to be. So I think just right out the gate you're hitting something really important here, Luke, is just to acknowledge that doubts often are our friend. If facts are our friends, we say in the business world, like, don't be afraid to look at the numbers, like, where are we really? And in a larger sense, can we have the courage to go on a real faith journey and just like wherever it leads us. And I, for one, want the kind of faith that's solid enough that if it isn't real and there's not like bedrock at the bottom of this thing, if it's squishy and it's all teetering on this house of cards that someone can blow over if they pluck out some fact that I don't know how to answer, if that's what it is, I don't I don't want that kind of faith. So for me, there's room for doubt. Can we just consider real objection? Can we have a kind of perspective in life, and I would say in faith, where we don't pretend that everybody's neatly split up into two categories, the doubters and the no doubters, but rather that faith and doubt sometimes beautifully, in fact, I would almost say always beautifully coexist together. And in fact, to have faith seems to be that you have wrestled to some degree with doubt. So that's kind of just, I think of my own background, Luke. I mean,
Yeah.
there was a period. So I'm one of these people, full disclosure. I grew up in a home where faith was talked about all the time. I saw it modeled for me. I grew up, with a church environment. And I had what I now kind of sometimes refer to as a mini crisis of faith. I was in high school. I was starting to read the humanities, and I was in a science and math program at my school with a lot of really smart kids around me. And you're at that stage of life, you start thinking like, well, wait a second. What do I believe? Why do I believe it? How do I know it's true? And I started to doubt some things really for the first time in my life. Like, am I just a Christian because my parents happened to grow up in this particular geography at this particular time and place? And I posed some of these questions to my dad. And I would hope I have the wisdom that he had. Because he didn't, I was frustrated at the time, but he didn't like give me any answers. He was like, well, sounds like you got some work to do and figure out what you believe. Basically, kind of just said it's okay to entertain. I was on a wrestling team at the time at high school, and he's like, I remember he made an analogy. I don't remember exactly what he said, to be honest, but it was something like this. Well, you like wrestling. Are you ready to wrestle? You wrestle 132-pound boys. Are you ready to wrestle with this to figure out where you're going to land? And that was the first time I sort of thought at the same time, wow, I was afraid of my doubts, but I was excited, like an adventure, like, let's see where this goes. And for me, long story short, it sort of led me on an investigation of things I'd never really looked at, poking into things that were assumptions that I hadn't really tested. I did some investigative work on, gosh, how do I know Jesus rose from the dead? Because it seemed to me if he did, that was kind of a big deal, kind of changed everything. And that for me was so important. And it also made me very skeptical and gave me a sniff test around other Christians that I saw that I didn't think. I said, I don't know. I don't want to sound judgmental, but I I have a new appreciation for doubt and how I think the faith that you arrive at when you've legitimately wrestled with an honest inquiry to me is a more robust, solid faith at the end
Yeah.
of the day. And it doesn't button up every question. It doesn't like, oh, I found all the answers. Now I know to sign on this side rather than that side.
Right.
No, but it was reasonable. And at the end of the day, I felt like, you know what? Questions are good because it's sort of, Jesus actually says one time some really hard stuff to some of his followers, and they don't want to hear it. And then, but they're like, but wait a second, where else are we going to go?
Where else we're gonna go?
And
Yeah.
that's kind of how I've wrestled with faith and doubt. It's like I
Yeah.
like to entertain the notion that, I mean, not everything makes perfect sense. I can't explain some of the atrocities of suffering and all, but it's like at the end of the day, for me, wrestling with those doubts has left me in a little bit of a place like I don't know where else to go. It's the thing that seems to make the most sense of reality to me. So I
Yeah.
want to say I have a reasonable faith that has wrestled with doubts. And Luke, you've got a similar kind of story, a little bit that I do.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm just reflecting on that. I think your dad gave you a real gift there, just having the space to tease that out and wrestle that out, as opposed to just answering it and putting the period at the end for you.
Yeah.
And yeah, I was probably a little bit. I'm a later bloomer, I guess, for you. But in college, I do remember it was there was a moment where like my mind turned on, and I couldn't shut it off. I mean, there was a time in my life when you could ask me, "What are you thinking about?" And I could be like,
Girls,
nothing.
sports.
Yeah, but there was a genuine time when I could say nothing. I ain't thinking about nothing. I don't know. And then there was a moment when that changed, and it was like, I don't have a restful moment here. And you do start to look back on some of the things that you inherited and the assumptions that you grew up with, and it's not easy to reckon with some of the feelings that you're having currently and the questions that you're having, and you put that against this trajectory that you've been on, and so yeah, maybe say more about that along the way. I'm
Yeah.
curious. I think it's important, Ben, when you use the word doubt. You're talking about questions and saying it's okay to doubt. I think that's kind of a conclusion we've already drawn. But before we go any further on that, just say a word about doubt as we're talking about what does it mean.
Yeah. That's a great point, Luke, because I think, yeah, doubt can mean a couple of things, and it's why some people react so positively or negatively to it. For me, when we're using this word, I think as you and I are agreeing to use it today, Luke, it's talking about reasonable inquiry. Like, are we allowing for legitimate, honest questing for truth? And if you do that, what that means is you're not just going to unequivocally accept anything that gets presented to you. Otherwise, you're just like, what is it? The guy P.T. Barnum who said there's a sucker born in a minute. That's not what faith is sort of like, well, someone said it, I got to believe it. So if you've got to allow the room for investigation, and that introduces the concept of doubt. You've got to be able to say, I don't know. Is this reasonable? Is it true? That's different. An honest inquiry is different than someone who says, well, I just have my doubts. But what they really mean is, I have shut out the possibility of anything other than the conclusion I've already drawn.
Right.
I have decided I'm going to be, let's say, a skeptic. I've settled it once and for all in my mind. And so I always want to say to that person, are you sure? If you say you doubt, and they'll say yes. I always want to say, well, are you willing to doubt your doubts? Or is that settled too? And so I think when we use the word doubt, we mean, I'm not just going to sort of take pat answers, glib answers, the party line, and accept it uncritically without engaging my brain, my thought, and what reality looks like to me with everything I can have to look at. I'm going to allow for doubt, like honest questions, like when stuff happens, what do I do with it? I'm going to let that, I'm not just going to shove it under the rug. Doubt. But we're not saying doubt when as if it were, I am pre-deciding that there can be no such thing as anything other than what I've already decided, whether that's a faith perspective or a doubt perspective. So that kind of maybe is that
Yeah.
what you're getting at? I think
Yeah.
there's an important
It's
difference.
like
I
a
think of
hardening.
the
It's like a hardening there. Either way, you can
yeah
be hardened, and yeah, we want to say I'm firmly rooted. I'm established in certain things. And that feels good, and you can maybe wear that like a badge. But if it really just means I'm hardened and unwilling to entertain any of the evidence, so to speak, or any facts or any input from anyone, I'm just sort of set on this thing, whether that's a Christian perspective or a more skeptical secular perspective. I mean, I don't think that hardening does us any favors in really an honest pursuit of truth, which I think is what we're
Yeah.
after.
I love that phrase, honest pursuit of truth, because the honesty is important. Let's be honest about whatever we experience in our life or whatever I've read or understand. And then pursuit kind of speaks of a journey, like you don't sort of arrive at something this important and then just stay there forever. So, there was a man at Mountain years ago, the church where I serve, and he gave me a gift that I have up on my wall in my living room now, and it's a picture of the ancient philosopher by the name of Diogenes. And it's this old guy, and it shows him walking through town with a lantern. And that's what the famous statement is, that he was walking in pursuit of what is it? It's a pursuit of an honest man, in pursuit of a person who is really honestly pursuing truth. And he gave that to me with a note on the back to say, thank you for creating a place where I could, like Diogenes, really look for truth. And I got to say, I think any person who's on a legitimate quest, you need to be in an environment, not that doesn't, if you're in an environment that is filled with skeptics who just scoff at anyone who holds anything but their perspective, that's not an honest pursuit of truth. You need to be able to have the Diogenes lamp out. Christians, you need to be in spaces, not just that it's like, we don't allow any other questions. We mock people who don't agree with us. No, every one of us should have the Diogenes light out. I love Mountain for that reason. There's people all over the faith spectrum. When you get up to speak there or greet, you're going to have people that are like, I believe this. I've had this experience. I've read the Bible or whatever. But you have also people who are like, arms folded, I'm not there at all, but they're there with their truth lamp out. And they're like, I'm in a pursuit. And I just think that's the best thing we could say is don't crave certainty as much as you crave truth. Right. And if you pursue that, it's going to lead you to a good place. And you're going to bump into some doubt along the way. But if your goal is not certainty, but rather faith, even a faith that holds in tension some doubt, you're going to be rewarded.
And I'm grateful for the people that have modeled that for me. You mentioned your dad already, and that's been important to see people holding those things in tension, not just running to one side or the other. The one thing that's been really meaningful for me, okay, we're both pastors, all right, so we traffic in the scriptures a lot, unapologetically, and that has brought some richness to our lives, and that's certainly been the case for me in wrestling through some doubts and pursuing truth. Like you said, one of the lamps, so to speak, that has lit my path is the word of the scriptures. And so I think a lot of people have the perspective of the Bible that it is something to be wielded against them. They're afraid of what it's going to say because it's going to expose some stuff that they're not proud of. It's going to judge them. It's going to condemn them and sort of put them in their place. And I suppose there are some aspects of the scriptures that do indeed speak a sharp word to us. But one of the things that's been so helpful for me as I've, sought truth and discovered some things in the Bible is to find on the voices of the people who wrote the Bible the same questions that I'm asking, the same questions that all of us are asking, to hear them like navigating and talking about their experience in the presence of God, and to know that the experiences that they're having are every bit as challenging as the ones that I'm facing. And if we're being honest, probably more so in a lot of cases. And so, we don't have time to do a whole jaunt through all the scriptures, but just a few to kind of things that have been meaningful for me, the Psalms in particular. So if you're going to go somewhere, you want to hear some honest assessment and some honest voices in particularly dark times. A lot of good stuff in the Psalms, a lot of, hey, let's celebrate, right? But there's a lot of voices coming for some hard times. Psalm 10 is basically saying, well, God, it sure looks like the wicked people are prospering. What's the deal with that? How long are you going to tolerate this? Psalm 13, I know, Ben, that's a favorite of yours. It's pretty raw, asking, how long, Lord? Are you going to forget me forever? How long do I have to wrestle with my thoughts? If you're feeling like you're going through that period of wrestling, how long is this going to last? I want to get to some answers here. Psalm 22 is like, my God, you've forsaken me. And, those words are even found on the lips of Jesus in the New Testament. Psalm 88, I'm overwhelmed. I'm in the pit. The last word of the psalm is darkness. It's just a stark thing. You get Psalm 137, just this angry outburst. And so if you find these emotions packed in there that happen to be the same emotions that are packed in me, that especially come out in a period when I'm under strain and stress and feel like, life is dealing me something unfair. Lamentations describes his experience. It's like, look, when I call out for help, God shuts out my prayer. I mean, that's the writer of the Bible just saying that. And I think all of us, if we're honest, we felt that. So I guess to just kind of get to a punchline there, I feel like what the Bible does is give us a similar gift to what your dad gave you and saying this will help you find your voice. Okay, this is not a tool to be wielded against you, something that's going to be a threat to you if you open it. But no, it can be a resource to help you find your voice in the midst of doubt and questions and give you then a healthy way to speak those to God. It's not like, oh, I need to go hide this stuff and keep it away from God. But no, it's actually a healthy move to feel those things and move toward God with them. And what the Bible does is sort of teach us how you can do that in dialogue with God. It sort of keeps you in the game and says there's still hope for you, even in spite of the questions and the doubt that you have. So.
Oh, I just think that's so important. I hate to say it, but I believe that there are lots of people that almost need to be liberated by what you just said. It's one of the reasons that I am able to embrace Christian faith, because it doesn't require me to sort of stuff the messy parts of life that I don't like or understand, or suffering or bad, tough questions. And I just think there are Christians probably eavesdropping on this podcast that need to hear that, what you just said, Luke. And there are probably some people who have rejected Christianity, maybe for the reason that they thought it meant that Christians have everything neatly dialed together and there's no room for some of the raw experiences of life. And yet you've shown us all through the real expressions of faith in the Bible, you've got, man, it's messy, but it's still where we land. And that's good. Probably a good way for us to draw this conversation kind of down today, right there with just an invitation to go on a journey with us together. We want to respect where everyone is and honor that with some of the tough questions we're going to look at in coming weeks. I think of maybe just one more place in the Bible that reinforces this, Luke. There's a place in Jeremiah, just about chapter 29. In fact, Luke, you and I have talked about this passage many times. Just set the stage for the kind of world that they're living in Jeremiah 29.
Well, I mean, we think we got complaints, and they certainly had reason to complain. Their whole world has been upended. I mean, everything they knew, their homes, their city, they've been taken over by foreign armies. Something came in and just said, okay, life is going to be different now. It's going to happen according to a different agenda. You just have no control, and a very hopeless time. No sense at all that you're going to get back that life that you lost, right? So pretty stark reality that they're facing in that context.
So in the middle of that, I mean, it's not too unlike a coronavirus reality, I guess you could say. And in the middle of that, God speaks through this prophet and says, you know what? I know it's a difficult time. I know you're kind of looking for answers, but you know what? If you seek me, you're going to find me. In other words, honest pursuit of truth is a good thing,
right.
And he doesn't force himself on anyone. And that's where the faith perspective is. The honest pursuit of truth is a good thing, and God says, if you seek me with all your heart, I think you can find God. And that would be my encouragement to someone who's like, I don't know, I've tried, I don't get it, or I don't like Christians, or don't worry about that. Worry about an honest pursuit of truth. And I want to give one recommendation, a kind of shout out to a book that's helped a lot of people over the years. It's called Faith and Doubt by John Ortberg, who's a admittedly Christian author, but boy, it's going to be real refreshing to the person who's like feeling relieved by this podcast today. You're like, I feel so glad to know that I can have doubt and maybe still press my way toward truth. Or if you're a skeptic, it's going to be a really helpful book. So Faith and Doubt by John Ortberg. He says the most important word in his title is the word and.
And
So we'll put that in our show notes down at the bottom.
Yep. So I think that's good. I think it's a good place to stop for today. And just to one final word to say. If you're asking questions or you have doubts, if you're honestly pursuing answers to those things, then there is hope for you, right? That's exactly where you want to be. Questions and doubt don't have to be a showstopper in your pursuit of something real, in your pursuit of, a good life, in your pursuit of God. In fact, they're every bit part of it. So I'm really glad for the environment that Ben, you and I get to work in, and the people that we get to mix it up with at Mountain, that it is a place that is not, freaked out by these kind of questions or skeptics or anything. It's a place where we can just, like you said, go on the journey. So if you're someone that wants to keep going on the journey with us, we'd love to have you, and we're going to keep turning over some more rocks, and we can't promise that the path will be easy, but we're going to take it as it comes, and our aim is just to keep going. So we'll hope you join us next time, and we'll see you then for 6 Feet Apart.